Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a book that challenges just about everything you might think you know about the creative process. It's all about finding art, not in some kind of polished perfection, but in the beautiful, chaotic mess of just being human.
So let's just start with a question, and I want you to be honest with yourself. For any of you out there listening, any artist, writer, creator, have you ever felt completely stuck? Waiting for that perfect idea, or the perfect moment, or the perfect quiet room to finally get started? Do you ever feel paralyzed by that need to get it just right?
You know that feeling of creative paralysis? We're going to call that the perfectionism trap. It's that little voice in your head that says, nope, not ready yet. But the book we're looking at today offers a radical, almost rebellious way out. It argues that real art isn't clean or perfect, it's born in blood and grit.
We are diving deep into Bleeding Ink by Saad. And listen, this is not your typical dusty creative writing manual. It's kind of this cool hybrid. It blends a really deep analysis of the famously raw author Charles Bukowski with a super practical guide for anyone who's ready to get real, honest, and yeah, a little messy with their art.
Okay, so here's the main idea, and it's a big one. Forget about polished technique and fancy tools for just a second. The core argument of Bleeding Ink is that your real creative power is forged in the messy, chaotic, totally unvarnished fire of real life. It's all about having the guts to just write it all down.
So how do we actually do that? Well, the book lays out 5 really powerful truths for any creator who wants to tap into this raw energy. And these lessons, they're drawn straight from the world of Charles Bukowski, who is an absolute master of finding poetry in the gutter. First up, and this one is a huge myth buster, the idea that you need some perfect, quiet studio to create. That's just dismantled completely. I mean, Bukowski was scribbling down lines of genius on napkins in dimly lit bars. The point is that the most powerful art comes directly from the chaos of our actual lives, not from some sterile, perfect environment we think we need.
And this right here is such a practical shift in mindset. Your surroundings, no matter how chaotic or boring they might seem, they aren't a distraction from your art. They are the material for your art. The challenge is to just stop waiting for the right time and start documenting right here, right now.
All right, next up. The book argues that the real key to connecting with an audience isn't your technical perfection, it's your radical vulnerability. It suggests that our deepest struggles, the things we are often most afraid to share, those are the very things that build a bridge directly into another person's heart.
So, this builds on that last idea, doesn't it? That emotional courage is just so much more impactful than technical skill. The big takeaway here is to write towards the things that scare you. Your personal pain, when you express it honestly, can become a universal story of resilience and, well, humanity.
The third lesson is a direct challenge to that inner critic we all have. Bukowski, he didn't hide his failures or his appetites or his chaotic thoughts. No way. He transformed them into these lines that just pulsed with life. So the lesson for us is to stop trying to clean up our own beautiful chaos.
You see how this just reframes the whole idea of imperfection? It's not some obstacle you have to get over, it's the actual fuel for your creative engine. A failure journal isn't about dwelling on what went wrong, it's about mining those setbacks for authentic stories and real emotion. It's creative gold.
Now, this fourth point is a bit of a spicy take, especially for academics. It argues that if you really want to learn from the greats, you should study their lives, not just their theories. Overanalyzing things can strip away the messy, human reality of creation, leaving you with a bunch of dry rules instead of real, actionable inspiration. And the insight here is actually pretty profound. Understanding an artist's human struggles, their deaths, their heartbreaks, their weird daily habits, that gives you so much more practical wisdom than any textbook on literary theory ever could. It makes their genius feel accessible, not mythical.
And finally, we get to the book's ultimate message. In a world that so often pushes us to conform, to fit in, just speaking your unvarnished truth becomes a revolutionary act. And, paradoxically, that act of individual rebellion is also the surest path to forging the deepest connections with other people.
Now, what's really important to get here is that your personal courage to speak the truth, to write just one honest paragraph a day. It doesn't isolate you. Instead, it becomes this beacon, attracting other people who recognize their own hidden truths in what you're saying.
Okay, so what's our final take on Bleeding Ink?
As powerful as all these ideas are, let's be real, no book is perfect. So now we're going to get into a balanced, critical look at its strengths and weaknesses.
So on the one hand, this book is incredibly practical. It does a fantastic job of humanizing the creative process. But on the flip side, its intense, laser focus on Bukowski is also a limitation. It lacks a broader context and, if you're not careful, it could maybe risk romanticizing a dysfunctional lifestyle instead of celebrating disciplined vulnerability.
And when we break it down by the numbers, you can really see where its power lies. Look at that score for practical applicability, an 8.5 out of 10. That is its greatest strength, by far. The research quality is a bit lower, and that reflects that narrow focus we just talked about, but its potential to really impact a creator's mindset, that's very high.
So all of that brings us to the final grade for Bleeding Ink, a very, very strong 7.8 out of 10. It is highly recommended for any aspiring writer out there who feels trapped by perfectionism and is ready for a grittier, more authentic way of creating.
All right, let's bring it all home. We're going to nail down the single most important lesson from this book and then talk about where you can take these ideas on your own creative journey.
If you remember just one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. Your messy, imperfect, complicated life is not getting in the way of you creating. It contains all the creative material you will ever need. The magic is just in having the courage to document it.
And hey, if this whole idea really hit home for you, I highly recommend checking out these two books. Anne Lamette's Bird by Bird gives you a similarly practical and really heartfelt guide to writing, and Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic is just a fantastic resource for overcoming creative fear, maybe with a slightly more optimistic spin.
And that leaves us with one final provocative thought to take with you. Armed with this perspective, that your imperfections are actually your power, the only real question left to ask yourself is this: what beautiful mess will you create today?
If you found this useful, please help us break down more complex ideas just like this one by following, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks so much for watching The Explainer.